And we're back. This is Pastor John from Millerville Community Church, and this is Coffee with Pastor John. Today we're looking at our topic of grace and power and Christians involved in politics. And should we be involved or should we not be involved? And I want to go straight to the headlines to get us started as our callers are calling in. You can reach us at 867-292-3030, 867-292-3030. You'll be asked for the access code 466-4877. But our topic today is all about politics, and our first headline is right here. It's about the pulpit power and politics, evangelicalism's thumbprint on America. We've from the CBC Radio, and they've got a picture of Donald Trump being surrounded by evangelical Christians that are praying for them. And they said, on the face of it, this photograph makes no sense. The Christian right has for decades championed moral rectitude, family values, and social conservatism. And there are some prominent evangelicals in the White House laying hands on Donald Trump, a paragon of neither Christian values nor virtues. So how do we get here, and where is it going? So the CBC looks at this and said, that makes no sense. How can Christians be supporting and praying and backing President Donald Trump? And so is it possible? Can Christians be involved in politics, and who to get behind? Do we just support those who are of high moral rectitude and just have no problems at all and are perfect in any way, or do we pack imperfect people as well? Well, this is a big issue. Our second headline coming up here is from The Conversation. It's an academic journal with journalistic flair. It says that Canada's marginal Christian right, and it raises a question about Christian right in Canadian politics as opposed to American politics. It says that naturally leads to interest and speculation about the influence of similar groups in Canada. But social conservatives and evangelical Christians are a marginal force in Canadian politics, even in the Conservative Party. And research finds their dynamics here are quite different from the United States. We find that Canadians aren't evangelicals as influential and powerful. American politics is also from grassroots up, giving a greater voice to them. And now that in Canadian politics, our power structure is really from the top down rather than grassroots up, giving us less access to having a voice in politics as well. The American Christian right is a powerful, dominant politics in Christian parts of the United States, but Canada activists are primarily fighting against defensive battles. So for the most part, we're just trying to hang on to the influence that we have and who we are at this point. Our next headline comes from Law and Liberty, 5 Insights that Christianity Brings to Politics. So this website believes that Christians should be involved in politics. And it says, when we do get involved in politics, Christians bring several things to it. One is that it reminds everyone that the state is not divine, that it's not God, which it should be obvious, and therefore can't make divine pronouncements about certain things. We remind people that the state is not the final arbiter of justice, that God is the final arbiter of justice. We encourage the common good for all people, not just for a few and for elite. We also, Christian Church reminds politics that we are a community of communities, and that we are involved in that kind of involvement where we recognize the family and the local is really what's important and what the societies are based on rather than large movements of people. We also bring to politics a naturally anti-utopian creed. We recognize, like Other groups do not, that sin is a real thing in the world and probably keeps us from developing some sort of utopian thing here on the earth. We'll find that there's always a tendency for politicians to want to create utopian universes. Our next headline comes from Christianity Today, a blog called Jesus Creed. This is politics corrupting Christians. Is that possible? And as Christians get involved in politics, if they do get involved, there's a tendency for corrupting of the Christian message to take place. First, speaking of Christian values as a form of congenial public discourse, and avoid decorating our politics with congenial Bible verses. Second, we need to remember that empires fall, so we don't want to tie ourselves to empires out there. Third, our hostility toward one another shouldn't be too remarkable in how we take that on. We should conduct ourselves with discretion and decorum when we get involved in politics. Fourth, realism needs to be a downgrade to the Christian vision. And fifth, our faith is political to the core. This article writes, the primary task of the church is to be an alternative to politics. Jesus was clearly a political figure, calling his followers to particular politic. His politic was a public claim and a public matter. It is liberalism that has constructed this worldview. And this is really interesting. Liberalism will say this: A, religion is a privately held set of beliefs pertaining to God or the afterlife or some such, and religion must be protected as an individual right so long as religion stays out of the realm of politics. And then B, Christianity is a religion, therefore Christianity is a private matter and must not be political. And so that's the argument of the secularist worldview, that it's a private held belief and should not influence the public secular political worldview. Of course, one would have to ask is, do they truly understand what Christianity is, and do we? Well, let's go a little further with this. Another interesting blog from Berdoff. He talks about Christians don't fit into the political system, period. This Charles Moore says Jesus defeats the principalities and powers not by the force of law, but on the course on the cross. But he subverts the world's very modus operandi by saying the kings of the Gentiles lord it over them, and those who exercise authority over them call themselves benefactors, but you are not to be like that. So it is by meekness and gentleness of Christ, Paul writes, that we make our appeal to justice and truth. We do not live by standards of this world, nor do we wage war as the world does, for salt and light is the testimony of who we are in our good deeds and our good lives, through which God turns the world into a better place. And here's his main quote: the life of the church is not only a political alternative, but a political answer. Wow. So we've gotten all kinds of different opinions about whether Christians should be involved in politics or whether it should not. I notice my camera is lagging for some reason. Let me just take a moment to fix that. Okay, there we go. Christian in politics. The Bible Society, it's the Christians in the Parliamentary Procedure, argues that faith in politics is throughout the Bible, from Genesis to Revelation. Almost every book of the Bible deals with politics and the Christian influence or God's influence upon politics. From Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, there are political issues throughout every part of those stories. I won't run all the way through each one because I don't have a 3-hour show today, but you can definitely check out that website, Christian in Politics, and whether we should be involved in the political system, and whether that's a way for Christians to go. Well, that's the topic of the day. We have guests joining us. I see that Betty Ann Graham and Kevin McInnes have joined us, and we just are so thrilled that you have decided to come along, and welcome you guys.
Thank you.
And so we're talking about politics today and Christians. What do you think? Should Christians be involved in politics?
Go ahead, Betty Ann.
I think so. I think as Christians we should be involved in anything that will further the cause of Christ and protect our country.
Very good. All right.
I think you said it earlier, John. I think that politics and faith have been a part of Christian history since its beginning, and actually well beyond that, because even in the Jewish history, priests were heavily involved in the life of the kings, and that's certainly continued on since at least about 300 AD, when
true.
Constantine declared that Christianity was the state religion, and it's been bantering back and forth ever since.
You can even go back before that, all the way to Moses, the leaving of Egypt and taking on the great empire of the Egyptian Empire, and the politics involved there. So
Well, I suppose you could go back to Joseph.
I suppose you could go back to Joseph, yeah. Politics there. Could we go back to Genesis, where God said to rule and take authority over the earth? And the command, yeah. So all the way through the Bible, we see that, and we could jump forward into Revelations and so on. But is it a dangerous thing, then, if you agree to that, for Christians to be involved in politics? Betty Ann, you said that it's good for anything that can advance the gospel. It can advance the gospel. Can it also hurt advancing the gospel to get involved in politics?
I suppose if it's not done correctly, and if it's not done the way God asks us to do it, we certainly know of Christians who have done harm to the cause of Christ. But I think that's where devoted Christians who are walking in the Spirit and walking hand in hand with the Lord, that they can be a benefit to politics, they can be a benefit to our community, not just our family.
Very true, very true. They can be a benefit. So there's a certain amount of skill required if we get involved in these things. What qualities do we need, guys? What do we need to get involved in politics? It's actually a dangerous game, because there is now they're talking about you assassinate a person's character if you want to win in politics. So you kind of got to expect to be attacked if you get involved in the political realm at any level, and most Christians who do are bracing themselves for that. How do you walk? How do you behave? What kind of quality you need as a person to be in that kind of realm?
A lot more guts than I have.
Okay. What do you think, Kevin?
I think the ability not to take things personally, and for some of us, that's very hard. Especially when you feel like you're being personally attacked, and they will do that. They will personally attack you. I mean, my own cousin got involved in politics in Alberta here, and was attacked by the NDP in a very mean way, and because of it had to withdraw, despite all of the good that he had done. He made a statement that doesn't line up with the politics of the day, or at least the culture of the day, and so, for a Christian even to enter into politics these days is very difficult. because generally speaking, we seem to fly in the face of what appears to be cultural norms, although I'm not even sure of that statement, to be honest.
Why is that? That last statement you made, Kevin, explain that to me.
Public life appears to be very, very different from private life.
Yes.
And so I think that there's a number of people who would be exceptionally good politicians in their publicly, but sometimes the way that things get said privately, or how they actually think and believe privately, cannot actually be stated publicly.
Yes.
That's what I think that's what I'm trying to
So there's
say.
this
So you can't.
being
There's a very
being political, you got to be careful with your words, how that influences people, and privately held beliefs as opposed to leading in political positions. And it's kind of like choosing your battles, right? Rather than fighting everything, it's, well, what do I want to accomplish and how do I get there? And how do I do that?
I mean, we have people who, as I understand it, are Christians and politicians now. Jason Kenney,
mm-hmm.
Stockwell Day,
Yep.
Ernest Manning, or Preston Manning, I mean, Stephen Harper, for sure.
Mm-hmm.
So absolutely, you can do it. And as I understand it, even in the Conservative Party, presently there appears to be a couple of people that have some Christian strong leanings, I guess. And so, can Christians and politicians be in it? Absolutely. Just you have to be. Nowadays, it seems you have to be so careful.
It's down and dirty politics nowadays. Hey, we're talking about should Christians be involved in politics. Coffee with Pastor John. You can call in at 867-292-3030, 867-292-3030, and join us. They'll ask you for an access code, 466-4877. That's on the screen. And we're being broadcast live on YouTube. Hey guys, I appreciate it. The question about Christian and politics, we usually think about something you see on the TV set, running for premier or prime minister or something like that. But politics also involves something much broader. The old saying is that all politics is grassroots. It begins in the neighborhoods and in the street and in our relationships. You can run for mayor of Turner Valley or Black Diamond or something like that. You're in politics, right? You might serve on a school advisory board. You might even be a member of a fire department or a police department. And there's political influence there if you work for the city or at different levels, even as an employee, right? So politics that are at all these levels. Is that right?
Mm-hmm.
And how
yeah, I think so. In that, I think no matter where we work, we can be the influence for the Lord, and it isn't always even what we're saying. It's often just our walk. It needs to be both, of course, but I found that working in health food stores. Pardon me. There was at 4 different ones I worked at. In each place, there was one person that just nailed me to the floor on every corner. Whoa. And I finally realized that it was an attack of the enemy, and because I was a Christian. So we have to be prepared for that. And as Kevin says, that's not easy. But still, if they had a problem, who did they come to? They came to the Christian usually for advice, and I think we have to be grateful for that.
Yeah, there's a tendency to protect oneself and to pull back. When we feel like we're not being accepted and rejected, we want to withdraw. So, but the problem with withdrawing is you leave that vacuum where there's no longer that voice, you know. So you hung in there, and then you became that alternative to be heard when the critical moment takes place. And I don't know. I've been noticing a trend that people like Franklin Graham has pointed out, that Christians have been backing out of the cultures and out of leadership and out of those positions. And so we have less and less of a voice than we ever had before. There's seems to be a huge misunderstanding. I'd love to hear both of your opinions on this, about what is Christianity. And what is it we're supposed to be doing? So, for the most part, the secular community that declares Canada as a secular nation and governments as secular, and therefore religion should have no voice in the culture, and it's a privately held position. I read that article earlier. It's a kind of widely held position that Christians really should stay out of it, because that's a privately held, that's your position, it's your religion, but it hasn't got anything to do with the culture and with laws and policies and the way we behave. So they want to relegate us to our church buildings and say, you just stay in those buildings and don't come out. But is that a gross misunderstanding of what Christianity is? Does our culture and our political system misunderstand what Christianity is about?
Yeah, I think they do. And I think an example of that is right now, you know, they've upped it a wee bit, I guess, that 50 people can be with great restrictions in a church. And I'm not saying we shouldn't protect ourselves and other people, but I'm also saying, who is needed more during times like this than the Christians who are in the church and who are gathering in fellowship and praying?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So there seems to be, Betty Ann, I agree with you, sort of a double standard out there.
Yeah.
It's down in the States, President Trump declared churches essential services. Do you think he was right?
Yeah.
Okay, you do. All right. Yeah, it what is an essential service? Most of it really truly is in our lives and keeps things moving. But the church has been in a retreat. Maybe we've brought on that perception ourselves in the way we've backed out of the culture and our involvement in it. Wow. Well, Kevin, I know you've been involved in the city, and you have experienced firsthand what it is to be involved in a political atmosphere up there. Is it what kind of qualities, character-wise, should a Christian have when they conduct themselves in politics, in political situations? What do you think? I've lost Kevin, eh? Hello, Kevin. All right. Well, what are experiencing is sometimes we lose a caller, but that's all right. But I do find that there is a need for a certain kind of Christian character, that when you can have political influence, which gives you power, but there is also a need to walk in gracefully in that power as well. And to accomplish that, we have to be very careful that we don't become too haughty or too argumentative, but to walk gracefully in power as well. So there's an attitude that we need to develop that. You're welcome to call in at 867-292-3030, 867-292-3030. We'd love to hear from you and what you think about power and politics and whether Christians should be involved in this endeavor. Christianity has been struggling with the whole issue of whether it's right for us to be involved in that and what our role in that. And down through the ages in different parts of the world, the answer to that question has been different, and how we deal with that. I'm just making some correctional things here. I want to reconnect to my camera to device. A bit of a lag going on there. Are you still with us, Betty Ann?
I am here, yes. And something that's coming to my mind right now
Yes.
is we all know of a former president in the States who had a very strong moral decline, we'll put it that way.
Yeah.
And I remember hearing people saying, well, that's his private life. It's got nothing to do with him being the president. Well, if it doesn't have something to do with a president being a leader and an example, what is it?
Well,
That really stunned me.
yes. So, boy, I see that all the time.
Yeah, right.
But if you're a Christian and you say, you got to have a higher moral standard than your average secular politician.
And even the scripture says that, about people who are to be elders and so on in the church. The scripture gives us some standards on that they, are to have a proper moral life and a upstanding godly life. And I think that should follow through for Christians in politics as well.
But even that's tricky, isn't it, Biddy Ann? Because who has sinned?
Oh, yeah. Right.
For all have sinned and fall short of the glory of God. And what the church is our redeemed sinner. So we all have a past, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So, and the first thing that happens if you get involved in politics is someone's going to go digging in your past and find something, right? The recordings, whatever they can. And when they can do that and they can find some problem, then they'll dig that up and try to smear that with you and say you didn't measure up. Well, no one does. No one does.
That's right.
And I think that's where a big misunderstanding of what Christianity is about. We're not saying we're better than other people or that we're more moral or anything else. We're just saying we are sinners who are redeemed and working to becoming more and more like Christ and achieving that standard with the Lord Jesus Christ. But in order to do that, we extend grace. So that's why we talk about grace and power, grace to ourselves and grace to others while we move to a higher calling in what we're doing. And I really think the culture misunderstands that, and they think we're saying a different message, that we're a religion that believes there's a high moral standard, that we think we've already achieved it, and we think other people should pull themselves up by their bootstraps and achieve that standard. That's a very different kind of understanding of what Christianity is. And politics...
An example of that, Pastor, when I first worked in a health food store in Edmonton, my boss, I made it clear to him at the beginning that I was a Christian, and he after a while started saying things, and said, well, he'd had a boss way up in northern Alberta that he'd worked for, and he had a Bible on his desk, and yet he cheated all the time in the business. And so that was a little bit of a challenge for me. And but interesting enough, after maybe 6 weeks or so of working there, he started asking me what the message was about on Sunday at church.
Oh.
And so I literally started bringing my notes in, and I would share with him what the message was about.
Oh, nice.
And eventually, he slipped in the back door of the church one Sunday and told me the next day at work that he had been there. And long story short, Eventually, he started coming. I was able to witness to him, pray with him, and eventually led him to the Lord.
Praise the Lord. Hallelujah.
It was one of those things that you just thought, wow, God was working on his life from the beginning, but he had to start to realize that we Christians make mistakes. And that was the big thing I tried to share with him. We are not perfect. Often the world thinks we should be, but we're not, because we're human.
I was talking earlier about what Christians bring to politics, and in the articles they left out one thing that is really critical: is what we bring to politics is grace.
Yeah.
and that's a powerful thing, to bring grace to politics. And with grace comes civility and mutual respect and dignity. But unless you have God's grace, hey, I understand. You're not perfect. You don't always say everything right and so on. But we're working towards a better world by following God's principles. And I can extend to you some grace. And when we do that, we get grace back. So I'm finding this idea that we're talking about, Betty Ann, about people misunderstanding what Christianity is and how you help this man come to understand what that is and then receive it, is a big deal and could do a lot in the politics and so on if we could just be more graceful with each other. And
so true.
And part of grace, from a Christian worldview and from our Christian experience, is that change doesn't come from the outside in, but from the inside out. So in politics, without grace of God, all you can do is pass legislation and rules and then try to change people by that. Or you manipulate them through words and protests, movements, and things like that. But the Christian says, no, you need a change in your heart first with God, and then everything else follows from there. So it's a very different kind of perspective than what the political system has. Is that a message that works in politics? Can we say that in politics? Because you can pass all the laws you want, but until there's a change in our heart, it doesn't really affect anything in its sense. I'd just apply it to a real world thing. Let's talk about war on drugs. So in politics, there was a war on drugs, and what it was a crackdown politically, tougher laws, throwing people in jail. We started filling up our jails with people on drugs. And then we realized we're really not stemming the drug problem. So the next political answer was, let's legalize drugs. Rather than throw everyone in jail and try to shut down the harmful use of drugs, let's just make it all legal now. And so you make it all legal, you still haven't solved anything. So you either throw everybody in jail or you just let everybody use all the drugs they want and get the government involved in the selling of drugs and the distribution and use of drugs. But in the end, has anything gotten better?
No.
No, because...
And Teen Challenge would say that, right?
Right,
Teen
yes.
Challenge, I mean, the young man and older man that go there that have a drug problem, there isn't usually a change until the heart is changed and they allow God to come in and do the work that they have not been able to do.
Perfect. I'm so glad you mentioned that. Teen Challenge is such a great group. We have one out here in Pritis, and they do wonderful work. A lot of them come to our congregation. And it's a great example. But that's political, too. So if the government way where they leave God out, either lots of laws or no laws, just lead to ruin to everybody. But if you back changing lives, where you get involved and you do that heart work, that's where real change on the long term occurs. And I wish we were more involved in politics to get that word out so that people would know. That's just one example. I think there are a lot of areas in life where Christians need to be advancing policies like that. Let's back groups like Teen Challenge and other groups. Organizations much older like Salvation Army and on and on and on. There are a lot of Christian-oriented, culture-impacting groups out there that are making a difference. And I think they deserve support. I think they do a lot more good than harm, and encourage that kind of behavior. Well, Betty Ann, it has been a thrill to have you on the air with us and to be a part of our show today, and I'm so glad you called. I kind of miss being together with everyone and hearing your voice. You always have great stories. You just have tons of great stories that I'd love to hear all the time.
That's because I've had 75 years to accumulate them.
Right. Hey, those years have to account for something, right? So, hey, you didn't need to tell your age on air. Betty Ann doesn't look 75 at all. She's just a firecracker of a woman. So, hey, Betty Ann, thank you. I'm so glad you came on, and I hope you have a blessed day with the Lord.
And thank you too, brother. Appreciate you so much. Say hi to your lovely wife.
I will. All right.
Okay.
Thank you, Betty Ann.
All right. God bless you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
God has been working in our lives in so many ways, and we're so glad for our congregation at Millerville Community Church and the blessings that the Lord has given in us. This has been Coffee with Pastor John from Millerville Community Church, and we're so glad that you've been with us and talking about these topics. Maybe you're watching this later on and you weren't able to call in, and that's okay, but I hope you'll find this helpful as well. That Christians can be involved in a lot of different ways, even just supporting groups like Teen Challenge or Salvation Army, be getting involved at your local food bank, High Country Helps, or whatever it might be. You're getting involved in the grassroots levels. That influences a country and a nation in the long run. Just being a good parent at home, it has a lot to do with that. It's been an interesting week. This has been our first week with our call-in show. We hope you would encourage other people to consider being in on that. If you're watching at a later time, I hope you'll leave your comments below on YouTube, and we will read that and respond to you as well. And we are grateful for your support. Millerville Community Church is a country church out at Millerville, just 20 minutes outside of Calgary, and we are working hard towards getting our church services up and running again. Just last Friday, the Alberta government has taken the cap off, and already our leadership is trying to get our system back in order and our worship teams up and running, and tried to do some outdoor services. And while we still follow the regulations still needed to keep ourselves social distancing and masked and so on. And so stay tuned. It's probably not going to happen this Sunday, but later on we're working towards that date as we put all the pieces in places and get back to worshiping together again. Until then, you can always meet us online in worship service. I'll be speaking this Sunday, Father's Day. Tune in to YouTube and Facebook, and we will be talking about Father's Day and the importance of fathers in our culture. Until then, this has been Pastor John from Millerville Community Church, and I'm encouraging you to keep the faith always. And God bless you, and I hope you'll be part of our Summer Mission 2020 as we share our faith with others, to your neighbors and people around you, your family. Share the gospel. People are open to it right now. This is the time to do it. God bless.